month. They are working with government to monitor the cost of household essentials for both price rises and disruption, and they've launched a market study into heating oil. Today, I can announce that we are going further to make sure that the Competition and Markets Authority have the powers that they need that were denied to them by the previous government to detect and to crack down on price gouging, bringing in a new anti-profiteering framework and considering time-limited, targeted powers for the CMA and other regulators. This week, the Business Secretary and I will convene the Regulators' Council to discuss their work to protect consumers. Because let me say again, this government will not tolerate any company exploiting this crisis at consumers' expense. Finally, I want to update the House on how I am preparing for this conflict as it goes on. I know that families and businesses are worried about the impact of rising prices. I have said that we will be responsive to a changing world and responsible in the national interest. And today I want to set out in more detail what that means. First, responsive. We don't yet know what the full impact of this conflict will be. So we must be agile in responding appropriately at each moment. We extended the 5p fuel duty cut, and we have pushed out the cheaper fuel finder, empowering people to avoid rip-off prices and chasing down the last few filling stations to reach 100% compliance. And when wholesale kerosene prices more than doubled overnight, we stepped in with £53 million of support to those who needed it most within a matter of days. And from next week, households will benefit from £150 off of their energy bills thanks to the action that I took in my budget, with a price cap giving households certainty on their bills until July, ahead of the winter months when people use 78% of their gas. Second, we will be responsible. The spring forecast showed that the government has the right economic plan, restoring stability to our country's finances and family finances. I will not put that stability at risk. As we respond to this crisis, we must learn the mistakes of the past. The previous government pushed up borrowing, interest rates, inflation and mortgage costs with an unfunded, untargeted package of support under Liz Truss. That gave the support to the most wealthiest of households. Between 2022 and 2024, under the last government, households in the top income decile received an average of £1,350 of direct energy bill support. That left us with high levels of national debt. A cheque written then for a bill that is still being paid today. I can confirm to the House that contingency planning is taking place for every eventuality, so that we can keep costs down for everyone and provide support for those who need it most, acting within our ironclad fiscal rules to keep inflation and interest rates as low as possible. Mr. Speaker, this is not a war that we started, nor is it a war that we joined, unlike the advice of the parties opposite. But it is a war that will have an impact on our country. The challenges may be significant, but I promise to do what is right and fair, being responsive in a changing world and responsible in the national interest. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shall the Chancellor Melstride?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Right Honourable Lady for advance sight of her statement. Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady comes to this House with an economy in tatters. She would have us believe that she has delivered the stability and resilience that can weather the storm ahead. But she has done nothing of the kind. When she came into office, she ramped up borrowing and spending and hiked taxes to record levels. She was warned at the time by the OBR and others that her policies would mean higher inflation, higher borrowing costs, higher interest rates, and that she would destroy jobs. All of that, Mr. Speaker, has come to pass. Her mismanagement and foolish choices have given us the highest inflation in the G7, the highest borrowing costs of any major advanced economy, with gilt yields higher than Greece and Morocco, fragile fiscal headroom, the highest unemployment since the pandemic and rising, and GDP per capita falling. Under this government, Mr. Speaker, we are getting poorer, and our economy is increasingly fragile and far from secure and resilient. And despite what the Right Honourable Lady has just said about tiebacks, nothing exemplifies this government's economic folly more than its approach to oil and gas. The utterly misguided net zero obsessions of the Energy Secretary have led to the absurdity of reduced extraction, whilst we see jobs destroyed, tax revenues foregone, and energy security smashed. And the greatest tragedy of all, Mr. Speaker, that in Jackdaw and Rosebank we have fields ready to go. In just months, they could be pumping vital relief to millions. Jackdaw alone has enough gas to supply over 1.5 million homes. Yet the Right Honourable Lady has nothing to say on that matter. And less oil and gas extraction means greater dependency and less security. This road leads to ruin. On energy, on the cost of living, on jobs, on growth, on public finances, on every measure that matters, this Chancellor has left us weak. And in the face of this energy shock, there are millions who are about to suffer as a result. So with respect to her statement today, could I ask her, how many fuel retailers have yet to engage with the new Fuel Finder service? And can she comment on the widespread reports of technical glitches and out-of-date price information? She mentions a small modular reactor plan for Wilfer. But given the need, can she explain why she has chosen not to go ahead with the large-scale nuclear site that was signed off by the last Conservative government? And specifically on energy cost support, can I ask her, what fiscal capacity does the Right Honourable Lady believe she has to support those in need? What is her plan to ensure that any targeted approach truly reaches all those who are in need? And on the matter of targeting, in her statement, Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor criticised the last Conservative government support package for not being targeted. But what she failed to mention is that the now Prime Minister was then urging for support to be universal. Indeed, he said at that time that Labour's approach would ensure, and I quote, that no household would pay a penny more on their bills. No consistency from the Right Honourable Lady. How is she going to ensure that support for those depending on heating oil reaches those who need it most? This support, Mr. Speaker, will of course, under this government, be funded through the taxes of hard-working people. Indeed, the reduction to energy bills this April is simply being taken from bills and being dumped onto the shoulders of hard-pressed taxpayers. But it does not need to be this way. For is not the critical question this: where is the control of public spending? Where is the renewed resolve to grasp the welfare bill, to get people off benefits and into work? I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, it is nowhere, because the Right Honourable Lady is a captive of her own backbenchers, and she has brought our economy one step from its knees. She knows it, The country knows it, and now we must all brace ourselves for what is to come. Not from a position of strength, as the Right Honourable Lady is so desperate to have us believe, but from a position of weakness, of her own making.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I think that statement only revealed that the Shadow Chancellor is utterly out of his depth. Mr. Speaker, in the last 20 months, we've had 6 cuts in interest rates. We have more than doubled the fiscal headroom compared with the headroom that I inherited from the party opposite. For the first time in 6 years, our deficit is less than 5% of GDP, and wages have increased by more than inflation for every single month that I have been Chancellor of the Exchequer, compared to the record of the previous Conservative government, which is the only parliament on record where people were poorer at the end of it than they were at the beginning. So I prefer my record to their record any day of the week. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Chancellor says that we should act. Well, we have acted. But what the Shadow Chancellor fails to mention is that his party supported us being involved in this conflict. Whilst we have called for de-escalation, the Leader of the Opposition said that we should be a participant in this conflict. The damage that that would have done to our economy would have been immense, and yet they make no apology for that. The Leader of the Opposition said yesterday about the Prime Minister that if he is creating a support package that is going to be done with taxpayers' money, then she thinks that we should be doing things that aren't going to cost the taxpayers' money. So on the one hand, you've got the Shadow Chancellor saying that we should do more and put in more money, and then you've got the Leader of the Opposition saying we shouldn't do anything. So where do the party opposite now sit on the £53 million support that we gave on heating oil? Because that was using taxpayers' money to support those who needed it most. It was the right thing to do, but now the Leader of the Opposition seems to suggest that that was the wrong thing to do. Now, the Shadow Chancellor asked a few specific questions. On the cheaper fuel finder that we have introduced, more than 90% of retailers have now signed up to it, and of that 90%, all of them are updating their prices regularly, and we, along with the Competition and Markets Authority, are chasing down the final few that haven't submitted their prices. On small modular reactors, the party opposite say they supported it. They had 14 years and they put not a single penny of money into it. And the same is true of Sizewell C. You can't, on the one hand, say that you think that we should spend less money and then at the same time say that we should be supporting Sizewell C and small modular reactors, because everything has to be paid for. In terms of fiscal capacity, we have more than doubled the headroom compared to what I inherited from the Conservatives. It was less than £10 billion when I became Chancellor of the Exchequer. It is now nearly £24 billion because of the actions that I have taken. The Shadow Chancellor says that we haven't built contingency, where the exact opposite is the case. Now, the Shadow Chancellor says, what about Rosebank and Jackdaw? Well, it was because of the failure to do the work properly that it was challenged in the courts. And 1 month after the previous government left office because they were kicked out, the courts came back and said that we had to reconsider Scope 3 emissions. The energy companies, Shell and Equinor, resubmitted their plans at the end of last year. The regulators...
Oh, sorry. Between both of you, you can both go and have that discussion outside if you can't be quiet in here. Chancellor next.
This is important because the energy companies came back thank you, Mr. Speaker, came back at the end of last year with their revised plans. The regulators are now considering those, and my right honourable friend, the Energy Secretary, will make a decision ahead of the autumn to decide whether it is legal to go ahead with those. But we made a commitment in our manifesto to honour existing licences. It's only because of the failure of the previous government to consult that we are in this position in the first place. And the honourable gentleman, the right honourable gentleman, says that if we cut the welfare bill, we will be able to help people. Well, I'm afraid they had 14 years, and he was the welfare secretary when the bills ballooned. So, frankly, we'll take no lessons from the party opposite. It is only Labour that can be responsive to the immediate challenges, because we have been responsible with the public finances, committed to our long-term energy security and committed to make the right decisions in the national interest.
Dave McHillier, Chair of the Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, we have no idea how long this conflict will be, and he is not assuming it will be over quickly. So we live in troubled times, and it's quite right that the Chancellor of the Exchequer is making serious contingency plans as we move through spring, summer and into autumn and winter. But one of the challenges of targeting support, as she well knows, is the data that's available. So what is she doing to make sure that the data is available to target support to those who need it most, not just across Whitehall, but in local government and in the energy companies themselves?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and that is a really important point, because the previous government hadn't done the contingency planning, and so when the energy price shock came along, they said we're not going to do anything to support, we're not going to do anything to support, and so they in the end had a choice about doing nothing or providing blanket support, and it was that blanket support that cost £78 billion. What we have been doing is working with the Department for Work and Pensions, with local government and others, to ensure that we will be able to target support at those who need it most. But that is in addition to what we have already done in taking £150 off of everyone's energy bills. We are doing the work. The prices come down in April for the following 3 months, and we are long way off of the winter when 78% of gas is used by households.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for advance sight of her statement, and our thoughts are also with our brave armed forces at this time. I agree that the last government's failure to invest in energy was a failure to protect our country. Today we face the stark reality where we cannot guarantee our national security, our energy security or our food security. When Liberal Democrats were in government, we launched the auction for onshore wind, and we established the Green Investment Bank, helping drive down costs and quadruple renewable energy. The Conservatives' decision to scrap the Green Investment Bank has left our energy system more exposed and should be worn as a badge of shame. To shore up our energy security and to tackle the energy crisis, we Liberal Democrats have consistently argued for a three-pronged approach. First, to reduce energy demand by incentivising households and businesses to invest in energy efficiency without the tax penalties built into the business rate system or prohibitive upfront costs. Second, to fix the broken energy market that is unfairly inflating prices, especially for small businesses on our high streets. And third, to provide targeted support for the most vulnerable and for those with the highest energy needs. So I urge the Chancellor to consider our proposals to create an energy security bank to offer low-interest loans for energy-saving improvements for households and small businesses, to reverse the cuts to home insulation programmes, and to exempt business investment in energy efficiency from business rates calculations. Whilst action from the Competition and Markets Authority is welcome, it is not enough. Small businesses have been blocked from the best energy deals for years, well before Donald Trump started bombing Iran. Yet there has still been no CMA investigation into suppliers blocking access to these fair deals. So I ask the Chancellor again, will she please instruct the CMA to do this investigation without delay? On targeted support, families are fearful. Will the Chancellor consider zero-rating VAT on heating oil and LPG? Will she consider introducing a price cap mechanism for off-grid fuels? Will she commit to halving energy bills over the next decade by reforming pricing structures? And if bills rise to more than £400 a year, as some are warning, will the Chancellor commit to coming back to this House and outlining a broader support package so that all struggling households, or many struggling households, don't face a crippling hit of that scale.
I thank the honourable lady for her questions. Nick Clegg once said it will take 10 years to get nuclear power up and running, so there wasn't any point in doing it. It would only come in the 2020s. Well, imagine if that Deputy Prime Minister hadn't blocked investment in nuclear energy then, and we would be able to get the benefits of it today. But you had a chance when you were in government and you did absolutely nothing. And the party opposite opposed onshore wind, which is also helping to bring down bills. In terms of supporting investment in renewables and energy security, we have created the National Wealth Fund, which is prioritising investment in defence and also in energy security, including in things like critical minerals in Cornwall, carbon capture and storage, and the rollout of chargers for electric vehicles. And we've also put £14 billion into the Warm Homes Plan to help subsidise and support people to make energy improvements in their home to reduce their energy consumption and therefore reduce their bills, alongside the Warm Homes discount, and where we have doubled the number of people who are eligible for it. On businesses, we are, through the business rates consultation, looking at improvement relief to ensure that if people do make improvements, including on energy efficiency, that they won't then be whacked with higher business rates. And on the heating oil, the honourable lady said we should cut VAT on it. Well, when they were in government, they increased VAT on everything. So it's a bit rich to say that they want to cut it now. But we have asked the Competition and Markets Authority to do a review into heating oil, which I set out today, as well as the £53 million of support that we've put in. But there seems to be a sort of slight contradiction in what the honourable lady is saying between whether she wants targeted support or blanket support. And I would argue that the progressive universal approach that we're taking is the right one. £150 off everyone's energy bills, but then targeted support for those who need it most, because we cannot repeat what happened when Liz Truss was Prime Minister, because a cheque was written then and we are now paying the price with higher interest rates, inflation and taxes than we would otherwise have to have.
John Trickett.
Mr Speaker, and I welcome the Chancellor coming to the House as soon as possible to make a statement. But on profiting in the fuel sector, the last time there was a problem with oil prices was after the war had begun in the East. And the government then, following its laissez-faire market policies, allowed prices to rip to an extraordinary extent. And the consequence, as we saw, was outrageous profiteering within the energy sector. So, can the Chancellor indicate that we're not going to follow the failed laissez-faire ideology of the party opposite and intervene directly in the market to prevent outrageous profiteering occurring in this occasion?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and that's why we have the Energy Profits Levy and the Electricity Generators Levy, so that we can claw back any excess profits. And it's also why, on this side of the House, we believe in an active and strategic state, including empowering our regulators, like the Competition and Markets Authority, to ensure that the price gouging that we've seen in the past is not able to happen after the conflict in the Middle East.
Sir Edward Lee, the Father of the House.
In an attempt to try and get some consensus here, may I commend one part of her statement, and I'm quoting: "We must guarantee our domestic oil and gas industry can play a role in our energy system for decades to come." Is there not a sort of sensible, middle-of-the-way approach here, that by all means we proceed with green energy, such as our offshore wind, where we lead the world in the North Sea off the Lincolnshire coast, but that we also have an open mind about extraction, new extraction from the North Sea? So will she confirm today, and I was listening very carefully to what she said in response to the Shadow Chancellor, that the Energy Secretary, when he considers these licences, will have an open mind so we can guarantee our resilience in the future?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his approach and his question. the oil and gas industry play an important role and will do for decades to come in our energy system. And we very much welcome the jobs that they create, the tax revenue that they provide, but most importantly, the energy security that they offer. At my budget last year, I set out the new North Sea oil and gas strategy, which includes allowing the use of tiebacks or infills on existing sites. Now, for the reasons that I explained, we now have a quasi-judicial decision that the Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero has to take on Rosebank and Jackdaw. But of course he will approach that with an open mind, because this government does recognise the importance of our oil and gas sector.
Ready?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that the essential truth is that the government has introduced a package of measures to make the poorest families in Glasgow and across the United Kingdom better off, whereas the party opposite proposes to plunge these families back into extreme poverty? They left us with ridiculous levels of debt and the weakest defence since the 1930s, and their record is absolutely shameful.
Well, my honourable friend is right, but I would say it's worse than that, because it's the legacy of two awful governments in Scotland, one who made people poorer, and then the SNP government that fails to back our nuclear sector, which could deliver cheaper bills for people in Scotland.
Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Could I gently ask the Chancellor to be less partisan at a time of crisis? If she brings before the House, difficult measures that are right for the country, she will have the support of the whole House. But if she is partisan, she won't. And I actually rise to support her basic instinct, which is for targeted rather than universal support. 4 years ago, energy bills were heading to £4,000. We are nothing like that. We don't know what the oil price will be next week, let alone this winter. But most of all, although last time we gave support to households and families with her support by increasing borrowing, we cannot react to every single economic shock by further increasing our national debt. So will she confirm that when she comes to the House in her budget with targeted support, it will be fully funded and not funded by increasing yet again our national debt?
I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for that question. When the Right Honourable Gentleman became Chancellor, it was on the back of lots of promises that there would be no support on energy bills. But the Honourable Gentleman and others recognised that that position was not sustainable. But work hadn't been done on how to introduce a targeted system. So the choice was a binary choice between blanket support or no support. And the Right Honourable Gentleman took the right approach then in ensuring that people's energy bills didn't go through the roof. But a target approach would be more appropriate, because the top third of families under the previous approach got more than a third of the benefit. That's not right, it's not sensible, and all it does is drive up inflation, interest rates and taxes in the future. So it's not the fault of the former Chancellor that approach was taken, but we are using this period when energy prices are actually falling because of the approach I took in the budget to ensure that we are in a position in the autumn to have a targeted approach.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Chancellor for her statement, particularly in setting out the long list of interventions this government has taken on the cost of living, which stands in stark contrast to the party opposite, who left the worst legacy on living standards in a generation. Can the Chancellor confirm that in the weeks and months to come, as she takes decisions encouraging regulators to take action and in contingency planning, that she will have that same thing in mind, protecting our constituents' living standards while also ensuring economic stability?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And, you know, it's why what we did in the budget last year was so important, because in other countries, domestic energy bills are going up now. But because of the measures that I took in my budget last November, energy bills will fall from the 1st of April, despite everything that is happening in the Middle East. But I can tell you what would have the biggest impact on bills is if this conflict escalates, as the party opposite at the beginning wanted it to do.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Shetland is home to one of the largest onshore wind farms in the country, the operators of which are paid millions not to generate electricity because of grid constraints. So the announcement this morning of a trial in relation to discounted energy rates for communities such as ours will be one that will be met with some excitement, possibly. When are we going to hear the details of how that will work and what it will mean in terms of reductions to the bills of my constituents?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. On the issue of national grid infrastructure, which is why we end up paying for energy that can't be used, we've got to speed up those connections. And that's why today I said about consulting on indemnities for building out infrastructure, even in the case of judicial review, because we've got to act in the national interest and get this infrastructure built. But at the same time, the Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero will set out more detail on the specific ways in which we can bring down prices for communities, including his.
Melinda Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents are appalled by supermarkets and other petrol retailers that are price gouging and profiteering out of global instability and a Middle East war that was backed by both the Tories and Reform. And let's make no mistake that if they were in government, our country would be right in the middle of it. Can the Chancellor set out the action she's taking to clamp down on price gouging? And can I thank her for the £9 million announced yesterday to help my constituents in Cowdenbeath and elsewhere affected by changes at Mossmoran?
I thank the honourable lady for my honourable friend for those questions, and thank you for the campaigning work that she's done on Mossmoran to ensure that we can properly support her community, as we are also doing with the Growth Mission Fund. But we have introduced the cheaper fuel finder to ensure that price gouging doesn't happen by giving greater transparency to the prices offered by different fuel retailers. This is something that the previous government could have done in the last 14 years in a way that in France there is already a cheaper fuel finder available on all apps when you're travelling. We are introducing it because we want to ensure that our constituents have the lowest price possible when they fill up their tank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the current crisis, does the Chancellor regret in her first budget increasing by £150 billion over this Parliament the unfunded borrowing that the Office for Budget Responsibility said at the time was one of the largest fiscal loosenings of any fiscal event in recent decades?
The party opposite once believed in fiscal discipline, but that has gradually eroded over time. It is because of the fiscal rules that I introduced that we've been able to invest in Sizewell C and in small modular reactors. That was not possible under the fiscal rules of the last government. But I would also say that borrowing fell in the last year. That didn't happen under the last few years of the previous Conservative government.
Rachel Maskell. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for her statement, and I'm sure she will agree with me that the biggest concern is the intersection between poverty and food and energy price hikes for our constituents. Will she look, as she prepares ahead, to a warm homes prescription so we can protect people's health by keeping their homes warm, which also saves money, and also ensuring sufficiency in the Crisis and Resilience Fund so local authorities can really invest in those in the greatest need?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and of course from next month families with children will benefit from the abolition of the two-child cap within the universal credit system. We've also doubled the number of people who can get the warm homes discount and put £14 billion into upgrading people's homes through the warm homes plan. But of course, as we look at targeted support, we will look at vulnerabilities within that.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor has mentioned several times about households benefiting from £150 off, but I have a constituent on the phone this morning who's been told that his energy bills are still rising and they are not seeing the savings that the Chancellor is talking about. What conversations is she having with energy companies to make sure that they do actually benefit from that fall in bills that she is very keen to talk about?
Well, I'd be very happy to see the particular details of that constituent because energy companies are both through fixed and variable tariffs passing on the £150 reduction that I brought in the budget by getting rid of the eco levy entirely and moving other levies from bills onto general taxation. So happy to look at the particular circumstances, but on average people should be getting a £117 cut in their energy bills from April the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Chancellor for her statement. We have indeed, as she says, made good progress on stabilising our fiscal and economic situation since the election in 2024, most notably increasing the headroom available in our public finances, but as a result of the last government failing to invest in sustainable energy and nuclear, we are much more exposed to price shocks than we could be. Would she agree with me that it's vital that we do all we can to protect the most vulnerable in our community, such as constituents of mine in Dartford, from the price hikes in energy that will result from this Middle East war?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and for his constituents in Dartford and around the country. There have been 6 cuts in interest rates since the general election, and more than doubling of the headroom means that we have a bit more room for manoeuvre in the face of shocks. But I would also say, because of the actions of this government, gas is setting the price for energy a third less than it was just 4 years ago because of the investment in renewables that this government are making.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the targeted nature of the measures announced, but 3 weeks ago it looked like inflation was going to return to the level that the Right Honourable Lady inherited when she took office in July 2024. That no longer is going to happen. But also, we see now the cost of borrowing, and given we're spending well over £100 billion a year on debt interest, what assessment has the Chancellor made of the implications of higher inflation and higher borrowing costs for the public finances?
I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for that question, and it is because of those concerns and not wanting to put any upward pressure on borrowing costs or inflation that we are looking at what targeted support can be offered rather than the blanket support the previous time that energy bills went up. The Bank of England offered their assessment on potential impacts on inflation, but as the Governor of the Bank of England has also said, the upward pressure on inflation because of the conflict in the Middle East is tempered somewhat by the action that I took in my budget last year, which reduces inflation between 0.4 and 0.5 percentage points, taking some of that upward pressure on inflation off.
Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Chancellor for her statement. Can I ask her to do something for a specific group of people, and that is people in the private rented market who have to rent their home, and especially in more deprived communities like mine, their energy bills are going to go up, but still their biggest outgoing each month will be their rent, and it is too often exploitative in areas like mine. We had rent controls in this country from the First World War up until the dying days of Margaret Thatcher. What can she do, thinking outside the box, to tackle this issue?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and I recognise that in his constituency, like mine and many others, more people are in private rented accommodation than own their own home. One of the reasons why we introduced the Renters' Rights Act, opposed by the party opposite, is to give people greater certainty and to be able to challenge increases in their rents, as well as greater rights over eviction to exactly help constituents of his and all of ours.
Dougal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just 3 weeks ago at the spring statement, I cautioned the Chancellor that significant fiscal intervention would be required to protect businesses and households in the face of this war in the Middle East. And she said at that time that thanks to her actions, the finances of the UK were in robust condition. Now she prevaricates in order to protect those self-same public finances. The two things can't be true at the same time. 13% of constituents in Angus and Perthshire Glens are on oil, 5% in Scotland, 2% in England and 0% in Leeds West and Pudsey. Perhaps that's why she's provided 53 million to support oil users, where that won't even touch the sites.
It took 200 days for the previous government to act on heating oil. It took us under 2 weeks, with £53 million, and that money allocated based on the usage of heating oil in different parts of the country. So there will be no help for my constituents in Leeds West and Pudsey from the £53 million of heating oil, because we don't use it. But there will be support for Scottish constituencies, Northern Irish constituencies, and many others as well, because it is the right thing to do.
Mr. Speaker, it is expected that food inflation will hit 4%. Now that means that a typical family's annual grocery bill will increase by approximately £240. And in Scotland there are approximately 1 million people that have experienced food insecurity in the last year. Food insecurity is closely linked to access and consumption of fruit and vegetables, and the Chancellor said that she is going to meet with supermarkets. Can I ask, what will the asks and demands be so that people can get improved access to nutritious and affordable food?
Well, from April the 1st, from next week, the two-child limit within universal credit will go, and food banks have said that will reduce the reliance of families with children on food banks, and that, of course, is a very good thing. There is also more that government could do to try and bring down food inflation, including getting a sanitary and phytosanitary deal with the EU, and we're committed to achieve that this year. That will bring down prices in the shops. It's opposed by the Conservatives and Reform because of their ideological dislike of the European Union, but it's the right thing to do to reduce food inflation for all of our constituents.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The sad truth is this. The Chancellor weakened the UK economy with her tax-busting budgets and her jobs tax, and this Middle East crisis has exposed that. Further, the Energy Secretary's actions are making it worse, and he's just refused to maximise drilling in the North Sea and issue new licences, which would give much needed energy security and affordability in the UK. So will she now see sense and overrule those decisions of his?
Since I became Chancellor, we've had 6 cuts in interest rates, and for every month that I've been Chancellor, wages have risen faster than prices compared to the previous Parliament, when people were worse off at the end than they were at the beginning. And if the Right Honourable Lady believed in energy security so much, why was she part of a government that refused to fund small modular reactors or Sizewell C and opposed onshore wind, the cheapest form of energy? If she believes in energy security, she should back it.
Andrew Cooper.
Speaker, my constituents are being exploited by unscrupulous petrol retailers who are not letting a crisis go to waste. A BP in Winsford, unleaded is 10 pence more per litre than the cheapest in the area. At Shell in Middlewich, it's 15 pence more per litre. Does the Competition and Markets Authority have the power it needs to clamp down on this unscrupulous behaviour?
So we've introduced the cheaper fuel finder to ensure that you have information like this, and most crucially your constituents have information like this. Already in France, you can see on any map on an app on your phone or your sat-nav the different prices of petrol at different filling stations, and that is where we will be in just a few weeks' time once we have got that technology to work with those companies. The previous government had 14 years to do something like that. Other countries have, but we were without that facility. Being able to do that means that all of our constituents can make sure that we fill up at the cheapest cost.
Obviously, you didn't mean me, I know that. Don't worry, Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I thank the Chancellor for recognising the disproportionate reliance on home heating oil in Northern Ireland, but recognise that the £17 million made available for 500,000 homes reliant on oil equates to £34 per household, and there's no data to target that support the £81 million available from the renewables obligation for electricity. We were told by the Prime Minister and the Northern Ireland Secretary of State that that could be targeted, and yet Treasury officials are blocking that. I would ask her to look at that again. She's made the commitment not to reinstore the 5 pence of duty on fuel. Could I ask her to look at red diesel? Could I ask her to look at taking a look at the rebate for red diesel to help support construction and transport and haulage and energy regeneration in our country to stimulate those parts of our economy that have a disproportionate reliance and have lost the support they so gravely needed?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. On heating oil, thank you for what he said, and obviously a disproportionate amount of that support has gone to Northern Ireland given the greater reliance, and we encourage local authorities to use that money to target it at those who need it the most, and at the same time to ensure that everybody is supported. The Competition and Markets Authority are doing an urgent review to make sure that there is not price gouging going on. But we acted in a matter of days on heating oil, and that was the right thing to do. On red diesel, when we froze the fuel duty, we also took action on red diesel, but of course happy to ensure that the relevant minister meets with the honourable gentleman to talk further about what needs to be done.
Well, let's speed it up. Harpreet Tupple.
Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor will be aware that we have a strong manufacturing sector in Huddersfield and in Yorkshire, including in defence and SMEs, but they are feeling the pressure of rising costs, and the Middle East war has seen input prices go up and disrupted supply chains. So can I ask how she's particularly supporting manufacturers? Yeah.
My honourable friend is right about the importance of manufacturing in Huddersfield and more widely across Yorkshire. From the beginning of April, we are introducing the supercharger, which will take £420 million off the energy bills of the most energy-intensive industries, and the British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme comes in next year, which will help, I think, over 5,000 businesses.
I'll tell the chance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fuel price shock that we're seeing caused by Trump's reckless war, highlights just how risky it is for the UK to be locked into these global fossil fuel markets. And of course, the CCC just recently pointed out that the cost of achieving net zero by 2050 is less than the cost of a single fossil fuel price spike, reinforcing the point we need to invest in the clean green technologies and get ourselves off being hooked on fossil fuels. Now, we've got a key problem in the UK because gas is coupled to electricity prices. Decoupling those prices is crucial. Will the Chancellor look at the report last week from Commonwealth that points out that decoupling could be achieved right now and would save households at least £200 each? Yes.
Thank the honourable lady for that question, and I agree that de-escalation is the best way to reduce bills for families and businesses. I would just gently say to the honourable lady, we want investment in renewables, and that's why we introduced the Planning and Infrastructure Act to make it easier to build them, but her party voted against that, which is keeping people's bills higher than they need to. We have had a third reduction in gas imports, and gas is setting the price of our energy something like a third less than it was just 4 years ago, and the electricity generators levy and the energy profits levy is ensuring that excess profits are taxed, and we can use that money to support the public finances and public services.
Justin Mathers.
Mr. Speaker, the consumer-focused, pragmatic approach by this government is such a contrast to the rhetoric of some on the benches opposite who would only see military action escalate and be in no doubt that it would be our constituents who would pay the price for that. So in respect of the CMA, I welcome the report this morning about what action they're taking to tackle rip-off vet fees, but that report took several years. So in respect of the new powers that the Chancellor's announced today from the CMA to tackle price gouging, can she confirm that the CMA will be able to act swiftly, nimbly, in real time to tackle companies who seek to exploit this particular crisis?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and it's absolutely right. The gung-ho approach of the party opposite would have made this crisis worse, not better, and our approach diplomatically has been to de-escalate this crisis at every stage, in part because we don't want that cost of living impact on families. In terms of the Competition and Markets Authority, as my honourable friend knows, we met them a couple of weeks ago to talk through what more can be done with cheaper fuel finder, to roll that out, to investigate the impact on heating oil, and within the next few weeks the CMA will be coming back after that investigation and looking more widely about how to keep prices down for all of our constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The £474,000 awarded to Dorset Council last week as part of the Chancellor's announcement is welcome, but I must tell her it really won't touch the sides, and more is going to need to be done to support rural communities. Unwillingly and unwittingly, the government is going to be profiteering from this by having a massive hike in VAT and duty take. Could I urge the Chancellor, because this would not add to government borrowing, to ring-fence either in whole or great part those excess receipts that she will be receiving, to ring-fence to support rural communities across the country as they face into this cost of living crisis?
Good question.
Thank you for what the honourable gentleman said about heating oil, and as well as the direct support for his local authority and many others, the CMA work is also crucial to stop businesses exploiting this crisis to increase profits. And as I said in the answer to the previous question, the CMA will be reporting on that shortly. What I would just say about ring-fencing certain tax revenues, it's clearly the case that a prolonged conflict is going to reduce other tax revenues and push up borrowing costs. So it's not possible to ring-fence a particular tax for a particular use, because other tax revenues are going to be coming down. But the whole reason we have the Energy Profits Levy and the Electricity Generators Levy is to have some sort of stabilisation in the system, to bring in money to support the government and our constituents when it's most needed. And of course we'll be using it to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for the serious approach he's taken to this conflict, unlike the hokey-cokey approach we've seen from the party opposite. Peterborough is willing to play its part developing our energy infrastructure, and we've already had £1 billion worth of private investment to upgrade the gas networks based out of Peterborough. But my constituents will know the price hike is not just about what's happening now in the Middle East. It's about a decade where we have not built the energy infrastructure this country needs. Will she reassure me that her plans today will speed up new nuclear, speed up investment in renewables, and get this country building the energy infrastructure we need if we're to tackle this for the long term?
Thank my honourable friend for that question. And it's great to see that investment coming into Peterborough, supported by my honourable friend in the gas networks. And that's in stark contrast to the party opposite, who got rid of our gas storage facilities, stalled on nuclear, stalled on renewables, and as a result has left us more vulnerable to an energy price shock.
Final question, Ben Lake. Speaker, what contingency planning is taking place to support non-domestic energy bills, especially in rural areas such as mine, where a great number of small businesses, community organisations rely on heating oil and LPG?
The best thing we can do to support households and businesses, and I'm sure he will agree, is to de-escalate this crisis and bring it to an end as quickly as possible. But as I've set out in my statement today, I will not tolerate businesses price gouging and earning excessive profits because of the conflict of the Middle East. That's why we've got the CMA with new powers to ensure that that doesn't happen, and why we are targeting support at those who most need it.
Can I? Point of order, Sir David Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. After the financial crash in 2009, a banker called Tom Hayes was wrongly sent to prison. Last July, the Supreme Court overturned his conviction, and in January they instructed the government to pay him just shy of £300,000. He has still not been paid, not because the government is disputing the sum, but because they can't agree amongst themselves which department should make the payment. So he cannot get an answer as to what's going to happen with him. I cannot get an answer. I don't even know which minister to approach because of the dispute, the wrangle going on inside the government. I've written to the Lord Chancellor. His department tells me I'm not going to get an answer at least until the middle of next month. So can you tell me, Madam Deputy Speaker, how I can establish the responsible department so that this House can get a proper answer to how this injustice is going to be resolved?
Can I thank the Right Honourable Member for his point of order? In the first instance, he may wish to consult the clerks in the table office for advice as to how he can best elicit a response, but he might also like to raise this with the Leader of the House at Business Questions, who will then be able to ensure that the question is directed to the correct government department. Point of order, Sir John Hayes.
Very grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker. When I rise as the chairman of the All-Party Group on Acquired Brain Injury, concerned about the news that 287 patients from a hospital in Northampton are to be reallocated across the country. NHS England have told local health bosses the hospital isn't fit for purpose, and so they must reallocate these people. Many are brain injured. The member from Northampton South is very concerned about this because many are his constituents. Given that you probably haven't had notice of a statement from the government about this, how can I draw it to the House's attention beyond this? And how can ministers be asked to come here to explain what they're going to do about this woeful situation?
Can I thank the Right Honourable Member for his point of order? He is quite right. I certainly have not had any notice of a statement on this, but of course he can raise this at health questions. Again, the advice, he can raise this with the Leader of the House, but he has certainly done an excellent job of highlighting the issue. I believe also in debates which I have listened to, and I'm sure the Treasury Bench has heard him this afternoon. Point of order, Bel Ribeiro Addy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Tomorrow, the 25th of March, is the UN's International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery in the transatlantic slave trade. The Ghanaian government's resolution declaring the transatlantic slave trade as a crime against humanity, backed by the African Union, CARICOM and a growing global coalition, will be debated. Given our nation's central role in the trafficking and enslavement of African peoples, a vote against would be a betrayal of every life it consumed. This House has never debated this. How can we be certain that our UN vote reflects the will of this Parliament and, more importantly, the will of this country? Madam Deputy Speaker, how can we ensure decisions of this magnitude taken in our name receive the democratic consideration they deserve before a vote is cast?
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for her point of order? As she will know, the government conducts diplomatic relations in the United Nations under Crown prerogative. Nevertheless, she has placed her concerns on the record and the front bench will have heard them. Of course, as this House has not debated the issue, she might do well to apply for a backbench business debate or alternatively to raise it in Westminster Hall or indeed with the Leader of the House at Business Questions. Which brings us to the 10-minute rule motion. Kirstine Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require that personal protective equipment procured and provided by public sector and associated bodies must comply with standard BS 30417 2025 or an equivalent specified standard and for connected purposes. I bring this bill to the House today as a proud member of the GMB Union. We all know the importance of personal protective equipment. It is the final defence against unavoidable risks in the workplace. But what's not always appreciated is that employees across the UK are routinely working without fit-to-form PPE, compromising safety and hindering productivity. BS 30417, developed by the British Standards Institution, is guidance that puts fit-to-form PPE as a consideration at every stage of purchasing, supply and use. Madam Deputy Speaker, our workforce is not homogeneous. Employees are not all male, 5'9" and 85 kilos, and even then, PPE is often designed for a taller man. Whether preparing food, handling chemicals, building houses, healing patients or fighting fires, too many are given inadequate PPE. Boots too big, they become trip hazards.
gloves too large they can't grip properly, or high-vis jackets so cumbersome they restrict movement. While some employers offer inclusive PPE, it's time for us to put our money where our mouth is. Enshrining the BSI's new PPE standard, or the industry equivalent, in public procurement sends a very clear message to employers and manufacturers that the future of work and PPE is inclusive. Over the past year and a half, I have met with women across industries, health services, firefighters, police, armed services, engineering. They are exasperated at poor fit PPE and often the ridicule that comes with it. Take something as simple as sizing. The smallest glove size available on the market is still too large for 86% of female hands. That's not just inconvenient and cumbersome, it's unsafe. Many women doing training drills on ladders, handling hoses and ropes, find them impossible as the gloves are simply too big to allow for a secure grip. Running into a burning building is something few of us would ever want to face, but our firefighters do this daily. Amidst an attack, running towards danger is something few of us would do, but our police officers do this daily. Handling soiled linen and cleaning up bodily waste is something most of us avoid where possible, but our carers, nurses and medical professionals do this daily. Madam Deputy Speaker, one Scottish firefighter came to me with her experience of running into burning buildings, but the service didn't have any female-fit fire boots. This is intolerable, a dangerous trip hazard in a perilous situation. In basic frontline protection, we are failing women who are putting their lives on the line. And the horror stories go on. Stab vests, predominantly designed to fit men, they're simply inadequate to fit the body shape of female police officers. Ordinarily, they're too big and too loose. When running, the stab vest slides up and down, hitting against their neck and chin, an encumbrance slowing them down in moments of danger. In one case, a knife slipped under a police officer's garment and she was hospitalised with severe stab wounds. Alternatively, officers are forced to tie them so tight it impairs their breathing. Madam Deputy Speaker, others spoke of needing to alter their PPE just to make it fit. This completely compromises their safety and makes the worker legally liable for accidents on site due to wearing PPE incorrectly. And that's before we even talk about the lack of well-fitting protective clothing for people with disabilities, religious and cultural requirements, and men who don't fit the average size. Women in war zones have reported their oversized body armour cutting their thighs when sat in vehicles traversing rocky terrain, or helmets falling over their eyes. We should not expect our service personnel to enter combat zones if we cannot deliver the body armour and fitted head protection that can save lives. Madam Deputy Speaker, whilst these examples are not limited to public services, the purchasing power of the state represents a sizable portion of the market. The purchase of PPE for our council, care workers, firefighters, armed services and police. This bill will put people at the forefront of PPE procurement, ensuring true fit-to-form protection from sparks and burns, waste and disease, machinery and chemicals. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to give special thanks to the people who put so much work into the new BSI standard and helped me learn all things PPE, a subject that was not my forte but has soon become a passion project. Firstly, the BSI drafting panel, superbly led by Sarah Gibbs and Natalie Wilson, and I'm grateful for the inspiration of Roshi Hussain for challenging PPE straight from graduation into various construction sites. Robbie McGregor for all his help, and the GMB team, Mel and Lindsay, for bringing their campaign for inclusive PPE to employers and to the workplace. I must also place on record my thanks to my parliamentary assistant Angus Walker-Stewart, who very diligently followed me down this rabbit hole. I will also take this opportunity to wish the British Standards Institution a very happy birthday, and it's a big one, 125 years of standardising our rail gauges, plug sockets and now PPE. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to conclude my proposal of this bill by bringing it back to where I live and where I come from politically. International Workers' Memorial Day falls on the 28th of April every year. In Bathgate, where I live, we gather in Balbardy Park. It is most beautiful in the springtime, with the cherry blossoms welcoming visitors to the park. Now designated a Park of Peace, this old colliery site saw at least 23 fatalities during its operation. International Workers' Memorial Day's motto is Remember the Dead, Fight for the Living, and this new inclusive PPE standard allows us to do just that and help ensure that those who go to work return home once again. With an ambitious plan to upgrade infrastructure and build 1.5 million new homes, this Labour government can lead by example and enshrine BS 30417 or equivalent at the heart of public sector procurement.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Patricia Ferguson, Mike Reader, Susan Murray, Chris Kane, Douglas McAllister, Joanna Baxter, Tracy Gilbert, Elaine Stewart, Lillian Jones and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Kirstine Sullivan.
Personal Protective Equipment Inclusive Standards Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 17th of April.
Friday, the 17th of April. We now come to the Opposition Day motion on oil and gas. I inform the House that the Speaker has selected the amendment tabled in the name of the Prime Minister. I call the Opposition spokesperson to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the motion as on the order paper. What do Renewables UK, Scottish Renewables, Greg Jackson from Octopus, the Chair of Great British Energy, the unions and the Tony Blair Institute all have in common? They all think the Labour Party has got this wrong.
Yep, all of them.
They all think that we should make the most of our oil and gas in the North Sea. Yep. These are some of the most powerful advocates for clean energy in this country. These are the great and the good of the Labour left. Yep. They all get that shutting down the North Sea is an act of economic self-harm, an unforgivable own goal when it comes to Britain's energy security. The question is, why doesn't the Labour Party? Let's go through our arguments one by one. First, the Secretary of State has argued that the North Sea does not help our energy security because all of the oil and gas gets sold abroad. This is rubbish. We use all of the gas that we drill in the North Sea. It makes up about half of our supply. If we do not use our own North Sea gas, by 2035 we'll be 3 times more reliant on foreign imports of LNG. That's much dirtier foreign gas. Why would we use that when we could use our own? The idea that it does not affect our energy security is pure misinformation from the Secretary of State, and MPs in the House today would be unwise to repeat it. Even the Climate Change Committee acknowledges that we will still need oil and gas for decades to come. If we are going to need it, then we should get as much as possible from Britain. Absolutely. That's just common sense. Second, they say maximising our own resources in the North Sea makes us more reliant on fossil fuels. This is total rubbish. Yes. Producing our own oil and gas has no connection with our consumption of oil and gas. The biggest barrier to electrification is not our oil and gas industry, it's the party opposite, making electricity more and more expensive by piling levies and taxes onto people's bills. Using electricity to heat our homes or drive our cars can help us make us resilient during a price spike, but the problem is our electricity is too expensive. And what the Secretary of State is doing, piling cost after cost onto people's electricity bills, is making the problem worse. I will give way on that point.
I'm most grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. Would she agree with me that the simple thing to do in order to bring down the bills is to scrap net stupid zero, so you can scrap all the carbon taxes, scrap all the green levies, and all our consumers and households are better off?
And please your donors.
Well, I thank the gentleman for his question. I do think we need to take some of the green taxes and levies off electricity bills, because the problem that you've got is if the party opposite keep making electricity more expensive, no one will want to use it. Yep. That's why our policy is the opposite of theirs. We believe we should make electricity cheap by taking off green taxes and levies. And that has nothing to do with the North Sea. Drilling in the North Sea doesn't stop anyone buying an electric car. It doesn't stop us building nuclear, of which I am a strong advocate, or wind or solar for that matter. They say that drilling in the North Sea leaves us tied to fossil fuels. But why? They only need to look at Norway to see this isn't true, a country which makes the most of its own oil and gas resources, but where lots of people drive EVs. So let's hear none of that argument today. Third, they say it won't help reduce costs for ordinary people. This is economically illiterate rubbish. We are paying tens of billions of pounds to import oil and gas from Norway from the exact same basin we could be drilling ourselves. What does destroying our oil and gas industry mean for public finances over the next decade? £25 billion in lost tax revenue. They say they are taxing the wealthy. Are they in the real world? They are taxing anybody with a pulse. Pensioners, middle earners, small businesses, farmers, drivers. If they breathe, they are taxing them. They are taxing them and people are suffering. But they could instead be getting that tax revenue from thriving industry instead. I'll happily give way on that point.
The North Sea oil industry halved in the last decade when her party was in government.
The Honourable Lady might like to know that oil and gas jobs have been stable for the last 6 years, but we are losing 1,000 jobs a month because of their policies. The reason I know that is because I have been to Aberdeen. Maybe she would like to do the same. We also saw yesterday that the markets are charging us 5% for our borrowing. That's because they think we borrow too much and earn too little. But there's an easy way for the country to earn some more money. We can make the most of our own resources and back the North Sea, and this would drive down costs for everyone. It's unfashionable at the moment to talk about balance of payments, but if you keep sending billions of pounds abroad and rack up your credit card bill, that causes costs for everybody. Fourth, climate. Labour will say drilling our own oil and gas in the North Sea is climate vandalism. I'm quoting the Secretary of State. This is patent rubbish. Every drop of gas we don't drill ourselves, we import from abroad instead. The LNG that we import has 4 times the emission of gas that we could get from the North Sea. LNG, for those who don't know, is gas that has to be frozen to minus 150 degrees, shipped in diesel-chugging tankers, then heated up here. That's why it has much higher emissions overall. Now, the Labour Party, who say they care about this and that climate change is the biggest threat to our national security, their words, not mine, they have a choice today. We could be 3 times more reliant on that dirtier LNG shipped across the Atlantic, shipped in from the Middle East, or we could use our own gas with 4 times fewer the emissions. Which would they prefer? Virtue signalling higher emissions under the Secretary of State, or more jobs and lower emissions under our plans to back the North Sea? I'll happily give way on that point.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. And does she not, like me, feel not only sorry for all the consumers up and down the country who see billions of taxes that could be paid if we just produce more oil and gas here, could be used to lower the taxes when they fill up their cars and travel to work, but does she also not feel sorry for the 2 members opposite, because they are captured by an ideological Secretary of State? Neither of the 2 ministers on the front bench are idiots, neither of them, and yet they are captured by an ideological Secretary of State who's literally having to make them swear that black is white.
I thank my right honourable friend, and these are two Scottish MPs. They have been to industry. They know what people in those areas are saying. They know the jobs that are being lost. And the question is, when the answer is so blindingly obvious, when we could use things that we make in this country rather than using dirtier imports from abroad, the question they need to ask themselves is, why can't their Secretary of State see the truth? Fifth, they say new fields will take too long to get up and running. This is dangerous, short-termist rubbish. Jack Daw and Rosebank could be up and running by Christmas. They have been sat on the Secretary of State's desk gathering dust. This hiding behind the process, I was part of the process. It is in the Secretary of State's gift. It is up to him to make the assessment. We are in an energy crisis. He could speed this up if he chose to do so. Jack Daw alone could produce enough gas to heat over 1.5 million homes. As their own Chancellor commends Norway and Canada for drilling more. That's what she said last week. She commended them for drilling more. She said every country must do its part by generating more oil and gas. They should ask themselves why their party position seems to be support the oil and gas industry anywhere but Britain.
Right, I'd just like to clarify whether the Honourable Lady agrees with herself when she was Shadow Energy Minister that nobody's saying that net zero was a mistake. Net zero in the round was the eminently sensible thing to do. We need to decarbonise and we need to have an ambitious target to aim for.
Well, I would thank the Honourable Lady, but I don't think it takes much effort to read out a whip's question. The question she needs to answer is why is she supporting a policy which is going to increase British emissions? She's supporting a policy which means that we're importing goods with higher emissions. That is what she's supporting today. 5 bad arguments which have been thoroughly disproved by people outside of this chamber, by people that they supposedly respect. 5 bad arguments spun by the Secretary of State which should be consigned to history. What the North Sea can actually give us is what it's been doing all along: stronger energy security, a stronger environment, a stronger economy. Are these not things that we want the next generation to have? And the question they need to answer is this: what reason does Renewable UK or their very own chair of Great British Energy have to back the North Sea if it doesn't give us these very things? Maybe, just maybe, it's time for them to admit that their Secretary of State has approached his role with a dangerous, blinkered ideology rather than being interested in the national interest. Maybe even they realise that they are once more being marched up the hill on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of public opinion, when we all know there will be an inevitable U-turn from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor in a few weeks' time. It is mad at the best of times to not want to make the most of our own resources. This idea that you would ban industry if you think they can't change prices in this country. Let's be clear, that is an argument to shut down all business in this country. There is a benefit to making things in Britain. It's called jobs and tax revenue and self-reliance. The Labour Party used to understand that, and I will happily give way on that point.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend giving way. And on that point about security and growing it at home, I'm sure my right honourable friend shares my concern that in the push for renewables, we are entirely reliant on the processing being done in China, on the other side of the world. So when the party opposite talk about not being reliant on petrochemical dictators, they seem perfectly happy to be reliant on renewable dictators.
My honourable friend makes an excellent point. In the trade wars that we saw last year, China limited the export of several rare minerals, which would be critical components in the renewable supply chain. Having an energy system which is dominated by renewables is having a system which is completely reliant on China. And that is why we think that is the wrong approach. It is mad at the best of times to not want to make the most of our own resources. In the middle of a supply crisis, it is completely unforgivable. And yet that's exactly what Labour MPs will vote for today. They are on the wrong side of history on this one. They should put their disastrous Secretary of State zealotry to one side, fast-track Rosebank and Jackdaw, reverse their disastrous bans and taxes, and put our energy resilience over their narrow political interests by backing the North Sea. And I will give way on that final point.
Thank you, Honourable Lady, for giving way. Can I first of all thank the Shadow Minister and the Conservative Party again for bringing this forward. My constituents tell me very clearly, if we have oil, let's dig it and let's drill it and let's make sure that we get the opportunity of it. Now, is it not ludicrous for the Labour Party to let Norway get all the assets from the drilling and us to get nothing when it's the same bed that we have? For the Labour Party to have any other sort of policy is ludicrous. It's against the will of the people, it's against the will of this Parliament, of us on this side, and I think the Minister should take a review of his decision.
Well, I thank the honourable member. I think these are the strongest words that I've heard from him in my entire time in Parliament, and the party opposite would be wise to heed them. At the moment, we are in a situation where we share the same basin with Norway, and last year they drilled 46 new wells and they made 21 new discoveries, and we drilled 0 wells for the first time since 1964. This is exactly the same basin. There is not a geology difference. It is a political line drawn down the middle. It is quite clear that it's the Labour Party's approach and the Secretary of State's approach which is driving this industry into the ground. I will happily give way on that point.
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. And one of the reasons why Norway, of course, is so successful is because of the certainty that is applied to the tax regime in respect of oil and gas drilling. Now, within the Conservative Party motion, as I read it, they seek to remove the energy profits levy. As a point of clarity, can she be clear with the House as to whether she would want that to be replaced by the oil and gas petroleum mechanism as suggested by so many in the industry in Aberdeen?
Thank the honourable gentleman. I know his party has a checkered past in backing the North Sea, but what I will say is that I'd be happy to work with anyone to look how we can support the industry. My position is clear. At the moment, we are taxing companies at a marginal rate of 100%. We are banning new licences, the only country in the world to do so. We are making ourselves more reliant on dirtier gas from abroad when we could be using our own resources and taking in £25 billion of tax receipts. And that's why I urge the party opposite, the party who used to be the party of workers, they used to be the party of industry, they used to be the party that understood aspiration in this country, to put themselves on the right side of history and vote for the motion today.
The question is, as on the order paper, I call the Minister to move the amendment. Martin McCluskey.
Gas production won't make us more energy secure and won't take a penny off bills. There is a lot of debate on this issue, so it's important to focus on the facts. And on that point, on the point of facts...
So for giving way, because earlier today the Secretary of State refused to answer my question about why it is that the price of gas in the United States is between a third and a quarter of the price of gas here in the UK. Perhaps the Minister could help us all and help the British people, because this goes to the heart of it, about the price of gas and the size and cost of our bills.
As the honourable member will know and will have heard me say earlier in this speech, the price of gas and oil is set on an international market, and extracting more from the North Sea would not make a penny's difference in terms of price in this country. The North Sea is a super mature basin that accounts for around 0.7% of global oil and gas production. Production has been naturally falling for more than 20 years, which means our North Sea no longer has the reserves available to support domestic energy demand. And crucially, any new licences now would not make any difference to people's energy bills, because regardless of where it comes from, oil and gas is sold in international markets where we are price takers, not price makers, and I'll give way.
If we were to accept that argument, notwithstanding the fact that there are global markets and supply and demand leads to much lower prices in some places than elsewhere, but let's accept, for the purposes of this, let's accept that it makes no difference to the international price. It's billions of pounds in foregone taxes, which could be used to reduce prices, to reduce VAT, to reduce all sorts of impositions on the British people, saving not pennies but many pounds from ordinary people's bills. That's true, isn't it, Minister?
Madam Deputy Speaker, what the party opposite wants to do is they want to remove a tax that is contributing £12 billion to the Exchequer, that is funding our public services, that is allowing us to invest in our schools, in our hospitals and other public services. And if they oppose that, they need to come forward with their own proposals. Allow me to make some progress. The only route to energy security and lower bills is to get off our dependence on fossil fuel markets, which we have no control over, and onto clean, homegrown power that we do. I'll give way.
The Minister for giving way. There seems to be some sort of complete failure to understand how the gas market works. Because the gas market works on piped gas, it works on local markets, and it works on an integrated supply and consumption system. And yet he's addressing it as though it's shipped oil. It's not the same market, and yet he's dealing with it as though it is. Could he please begin to address the fact that this is a very different market?
We have been importers since 2004 of gas, and the party opposite will know, because they presided over the period of this decline. They will know that it's been declining for some time. Allow me to make some progress. Recent events in the Middle East are yet another reminder of the need to speed up that transition and protect British people from these price shocks. Thanks to our mission to make the UK a clean energy superpower, we have already seen £90 billion of investment announced for clean British energy, but now we are determined to go even further and faster in pursuit of national energy security, and I'll give way.
Thank you, Minister, for giving way, and I accept his point about having more homegrown renewables can be good for insulating ourselves from the economic output. But he will know there are great swathes of our industrial base that are gas dependent, not least the ceramics industry. So what message does he send to them? Because currently the price per therm is twice what it was 3 weeks ago. They're renewing their contracts. This is going to kill industry in certain parts of our foundational sector that we need to meet our mission. So what's the government's message to those industries?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know my honourable friend is a real advocate for the industries in his constituency, and the Minister for Industry is looking in detail at this and is coming forward with proposals for industry to take us through this moment where we are dealing with this situation in the Middle East. We are bringing forward the next renewables auction months after our most successful auction ever secured enough power for the equivalent of 16 million homes. And just today, we set out plans to make plug-in solar available in supermarkets so more people can put a panel on their balcony or outdoor space and begin saving energy. And we're ensuring heat pumps and solar panels will be standard in new build homes. Madam Deputy Speaker, one moment. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to talk about the Energy Profits Levy, which has been mentioned by a number of honourable members across the House. Since its introduction in 2022, the Energy Profits Levy has raised around £12 billion. This revenue supports, as I said earlier, vital public services. And as the Chancellor noted at the recent spring forecast, the Energy Profits Levy will be replaced by the new oil and gas price mechanism in 2030, or sooner if average oil and gas prices over 6 months fall below the thresholds of the Energy Security Investment Mechanism. The Chancellor recognises industry's calls for the EPL to be replaced by the mechanism and wants to work with industry to provide certainty on the future fiscal regime whilst taxing windfall profits of energy companies. And I'll give way.
For giving way. On the Energy Profits Levy, the OBR's own forecast last year downgraded the income that they're expecting from oil and gas by 40% between March and November, and then another 20% between November and March this year. By 2020-30, we're now only expecting £100 million from a sector that used to bring home billions. That's because of the EPL, and that's because of the ban on licences, and that's the impact that Labour are having on the oil and gas sector.
The honourable lady will know that this is a windfall tax on windfall profits. If there are not windfall profits, there will not be a windfall tax. The motion, allow me to make progress. The motion also calls for an end to the ban on oil and gas licensing. The government has been clear that it will support the management of existing fields for their lifespan. That's why we've committed to introducing transitional energy certificates that will enable some offshore oil and gas production in areas adjacent to already licensed fields, linked via a tieback, or in areas that are already part of an existing field. But new licences to explore new fields would make no material difference to overall production and would run contrary to the science on tackling the climate crisis.
Why does he think the strategy of this government is so different to that of Norway? Nobody's doubting the commitment that Norway has to the environment and to net zero. And yet they're pumping more oil and gas than they have done for a very long time, notwithstanding their commitment in the longer term to net zero.
Speaker, Norway has managed their fuels in a very different way to this country has over a course of 40 or 50 years, and every country will take its own decisions on how best to secure its own energy supply, and many other countries are taking a similar approach to the United Kingdom. Let me turn now to Jackdaw and Rosebank, which is addressed in the motion from the opposition. At the outset, I should say that it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the merits of individual cases, because doing so could prejudice the decision-making process. As with planning decisions which are comparable in nature, offshore oil and gas projects are subject to a robust and legally grounded regulatory framework under which information submitted by developers must be carefully assessed. In both the Jackdaw and Rosebank cases, the Secretary of State will make a decision on whether to agree to these being consented in due course. It's imperative that all relevant material is properly considered so that decisions are sound, defensible and robust. When reaching a view, the Secretary of State will assess the overall balance between any potential significant environmental effects and the wider benefits to the interests of the country. And as members would expect, that assessment will involve considering a range of factors which may include energy security alongside environmental considerations. Some have asked why these decisions are taking time. The answer is straightforward. These are planning-type decisions that must be taken in full knowledge of the facts. The guidance on the assessment of Scope 3 emissions published last year in response to the Supreme Court's judgment is the first of its kind, and it is therefore crucial that we take the time to apply it properly. It serves no one's interest for decisions to be rushed, and certainly doesn't serve the benefits of industry or the honourable gentleman who is chuntering from a sedentary position's constituents, only to be overturned later by the courts, which was the mess that the previous government got into. Of course.
I thank you for giving way. He mentioned their energy security, and of course this is fundamentally the most important issue facing us as a country at the moment, not only because of the conflict in the Middle East, but wider conflicts, including that in Ukraine. Is it not the case that we must stop taking short-term decisions and instead look for the long-term future of our energy so that we can get nationally controlled energy security, which is good for our national security too?
My honourable friend makes a really important point that I think gets to the heart of this debate. We aren't going to learn the wrong lessons from the situation that we're currently facing in the Middle East. We will not make ourselves more reliant on fossil fuels at a time when we can see playing out day after day after day in all of our constituents at rising prices the effect of being overly reliant and overly exposed to gas and fossil fuels. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are incredibly fortunate to have the North Sea on our doorstep. For almost half a century, the oil and gas buried there has fuelled development and charged our economy. But for too long now, governments have ignored the transition that is happening before their eyes. We owe it to the North Sea's workers and the communities who have done so much for our country to set out a proper plan for their future and seize the immense potential in clean energy. And I'll give way.
Thank him for giving way. The workers who he's referring to have a very different take on his government's approach to the North Sea than he does. Indeed, I think they would be incredulous at the arguments that he's making today and his government have made over many months, because it is costing them their jobs. He knows that moving from the Energy Profits Levy to the OGPM as quickly as possible will give those workers some hope and will help assist with the energy security. Is he or his department currently in discussions with the Treasury about making that happen?
The Chancellor has had discussions with industry and will continue to have those discussions with industry, and that's right and appropriate way to conduct these decisions. And I was pleased to be myself in Aberdeen a couple of weeks ago talking to the same workers that he mentions. And of course we need to do as much as possible to ensure that oil and gas workers are properly protected through this transition, but that we also don't lose sight of the great potential, for example, in floating offshore wind, which will also provide a significant future for his constituents and for people across Scotland. As I was saying, the transition that is underway is the only way to get off the roller coaster of fossil fuels and build a more secure energy system. Following a consultation with businesses and communities last autumn, we set out the steps we're taking to unleash the North Sea's clean energy future. That plan recognises that our world-class energy workers and supply chains and the importance of supporting them through that transition, and I'll give way.
Well, the Minister has been most generous. He'll know that Harbour Energy was the largest single producer in the North Sea. They're leaving. He will know that it's been devastating for so many workers in the industry. And he also know that by all projections, in 2050, this country will still be dependent on oil and gas. Dependent on oil and gas in 2050, in all scenarios. Dependent. And yet, by not doing new licences, we will by definition be more dependent on foreign supply, much of it having to come through the Straits of Hormuz. How can that make any sense? I don't think the Minister thinks it does, but I suppose he's forced to stand on his feet and repeat the nonsense that comes out of the mouth of his Secretary of State. I ask him.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm more than capable of forming my own conclusions, and what's in this speech are my own conclusions. And I would encourage the honourable gentleman to listen to what I've had to say throughout this. Harbour Energy is continuing to operate. He talks about dependence. The dependence that we are seeing at the moment is dependence on fossil fuels, is dependence on oil and gas, which has left every single one of our constituents across this House exposed to volatile oil and gas prices, exposed to higher prices. As in my response to my honourable friend earlier, the only way off of this is off the roller coaster of fossil fuels, on to homegrown energy that we control where we can control the price. That is a responsible action from a government that's focused on the long term and not the short term, of course.
Offshore Energy UK doesn't agree with him, because it said that at the current rate, with the government crashing the North Sea industry, we're going to be 3 times more reliant by 2035 for gas as we are at the moment. Is he right, or is Offshore Energy UK right?
Minister.
I'll say to the honourable gentleman what I said to his front bench last week, which is we need to stop, or the party opposite needs to stop talking down the North Sea. 1.1 million barrels a day being extracted. That is not an industry that is being shut down. That is an industry that is continuing to produce. Let me conclude. Just last week, the Minister for Energy met with our North Sea Futures Board in Aberdeen with representatives from industry, unions and local groups to discuss how we can drive a fair, orderly and prosperous transition. Madam Deputy Speaker, to conclude, net zero is the economic opportunity of the century, despite what honourable gentlemen on the backbench might say. This government will make sure that our oil and gas workers can take advantage of that opportunity while driving for energy sovereignty and abundance with clean, homegrown power.
The original question was as on the order paper, since when Amendment A has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the original words stand part of the question. Before I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, just to alert members, there will be an immediate 4-minute time limit, which of course does not apply to the front benches. Pippa Halings.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I think we do need to be clear that this energy crisis is in effect an oil and gas crisis, and shows us yet again just how dangerous our over-dependence on fossil fuels really is. Just as with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Middle East conflict shows how a single geopolitical escalation can send energy prices soaring, leaving households and businesses here in the UK exposed to shocks beyond their control. And history is now in danger of repeating itself. Families struggling with higher gas, petrol and food prices, while energy companies' profits surge. If the conflict continues, forecasts from Cornwall Insight suggest that energy bills could rise by £332 this July. A £332 Trump war tax on our energy bills. And yet what do we see is the Conservative Party's response? More drilling, more dependence, more of the roller coaster of volatile fossil fuel prices. And along with reform, those here today misleading the public on the need to drill, baby, drill, are the